when you lift up a woman, she brings 4 people with her. And the idea is that, when you invest in the education of young girls and women, we actually really do take up other people with us. And so I think I would hope that we become kind of evidence of that playing out.
Before we get into it, could you just talk me through what inspired you, what the origins of it? Because I think the tagline was empowering young women through creative coding and data storytelling, right? That's sort of the tagline that you used for Data Garden Project. So could you talk a bit more about, how did it come to be and why?
Yeah. Can I talk about what it is first?
By all means.
So the Data Garden is a community and a resource that aims to teach young girls and women, like you said, about data storytelling. And we do that through creative coding. And I say it that way because it is not just coding. So obviously, that's how we started and that's the language that we started speaking. But it's more to do with the fact that, so how it works is we invite people to basically do what we call a hunt and gather. So you hunt and gather data from your own personal life. And this is hugely inspired by a project called Dear Data, and I suggest you looking that up too. And that's by Georgia Lupi and Stephanie Posevich, who are both incredible designers. So how it works is that we invite people to go on this hunt and gather data from your own lives. It can be a week of playlists you listen to, or interactions with friends and family, or your commutes, or food you ate, whatever that resonates with you on a personal level. We teach them how to develop that into a data set with all the data points in different categories, and then we encourage and then we kind of give them the tools and the guidance to be able to visualize it and tell that story in a way that is personal, that is meaningful to them. Oftentimes it is coding. So we use P5.js, which is the kind of programming language that we use. But it's not always coding. We've seen people illustrate their data. We've seen people embroider their data. And so in a way, it is about storytelling, because that's what I am. I'm a storyteller at heart and by trade. But it's really about encouraging that learning through community and being able to kind of really facilitate peer learning in such a way where you're being introduced to this new tool, that being coding or technology in general, but through actually really ancient practices and understandings of art and of storytelling in general. And it's just, it's scrapbooks of your own life, right, if you think about it, and then sharing that with a safe community and a supportive community.
Now, looking at it from a more holistic point of view, what Data Garden Project 1, but as well as your other work so far, you've dealt a lot with, building and sustaining communities, right? Building a network of people, both either in a professional sense or just in a casual setting, right? So what are some lessons that you've taken away in terms of either unexpected pleasant surprises, but as well as challenges in building and sustaining communities?
I think the challenge is kind of what I mentioned earlier, which is actually making this baby, right, that you've kind of raised, which is in my case is the Data Garden, making that not just it's Joe's thing, but that it becomes how do I make this a shared ownership type thing? And that takes years and trust and time to build. And sometimes the challenge is also that you just don't get the thing. 2022, we filed in for, we submitted an application for the Processing Foundation Fellowship and didn't get it. And so that's why I, resort to YouTube and just making all the stuff out there on my own time. In 2023, basically it took a phone call with my mentor before I wrote my application again. Not much has changed with Data Garden from an organizational perspective, but she just kind of gave me all the pointers of I think what she told me actually was that you need to lean into your strengths and you need to lean into what makes you unique. It's not the code. Everyone's talking about the code. Everyone there will know how to code, knows software. It's not about that. And because I felt that like, oh, it's a fellowship from like a software organization. Obviously, I need to be really high tech and really like, I want to be that. And that was the facade that I was really ready to kind of build up in my grant application. But she was like, no, it's the fact that you're building up young women. It's the fact that, you're taking us back to just this very like, a simple art of like storytelling. And you're actually just like making scrapbooks about your own life and you're kind of like sharing it with friends. But the thing is you're just using code to be able to do that. And it's community and it's all the stuff that you've got like down pat, but you got to learn to own it. Like in your grant application, you got to like really push that forward. And so it was just a matter of like better writing. Like I just like wrote the application entirely differently to how I did it the year before. And that's how we got it in 2023. So that was a lesson there. The fact that, when you enter a space, don't feel like you have to like, don't feel like you have to, at least for me, it was like she was saying, don't feel like you have to like kind of be what everyone kind of like, don't feel like you have to like mirror what you see from other people, but you got to hold your own when you're kind of going into that. My mom gives me that advice whenever I go into a job interview or whatever. It's like all of these, especially being Indo gitu kan, being Indo diaspora. It's like you want to be like, apa ya?
Gotta make your mark.
Yeah, you gotta like, but you want to blend in and just like be as much like part of it. But holding your own has power to it too. Yeah, and I guess in terms of surprises, like earlier this year, there was like a moment where, so when we did our workshop with Pavilion, which is like this architectural site just across the NGV, so we ran like a data stitching workshop, basically.
So what is data stitching?
So great question. So this was spearheaded by my partner, May, and so she and I work together on the Data Garden, and basically do you know those like embroidery hoops and circles that you kind of just like stitch stuff into and people make, pictures out of, these little threads or beads or whatever. So it's that. But essentially what we did was we gathered a group of people at the Pavilion. Did you go there? Like when it was open? Have you heard of Pavilion before?
I think I've at least walked past it a few times. But
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So we gathered a few people in this kind of workshop at Pavilion. So we were at the site, and what we did was we took this group of people to go around the garden that was across the NGV, and we were looking at trees. And so the philosophy behind it is that, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like allow me to yap, okay? But basically, we see data processing tools as like what? Our phones or the weather app, or we see technology as things that are capable of processing data. But what we forget is that humans are data processing tools too. You and I are always processing information, stripping it down and delivering it to ourselves in a way that makes sense to us. And that accounts for like our life experiences as well in general. So that was what guided our workshop in the sense that when we went out, we would visit like kind of this set of maybe like 10 or 12 different trees around the garden. We were literally like people like looking at trees. We were like botanists. We were like, oh, what is the type of leaf or what is the type of branch? So 2 ways to measure a tree. You can look at it from its actual height, from the name of its species, the type of leaf, the type of bark. Or you can measure it in ways that are like, do I think I can climb this tree? Or like, how many times do I have to hug around this tree to be able to, make a full circle? Or do I feel calm when standing below this tree? And the idea is that you're processing not just measurable, scientific data, but you're also measuring your like data in relative to like your experience with the tree, if that makes sense. So we guided them to like record all that data. We went back to the site, and then basically we guided them to also like map each of those data points into like different colored threads. And so, for example, if the tree is tall, I'll give it like a blue thread. If the tree is short, I'll give it a red thread or something like that. And what we're actually teaching there with no screens at all is computational thinking, right? Because that's JavaScript. If this, then that. If this is the data you receive, here is your output, right? And so from there, people then get to visualize their recollection of the trees or their data set of the trees using embroidery. And so they were stitching. We spent a good hour just like stitching and putting beads and threads together. And everyone went home with like kind of makeshift, visualizations of their day in the garden. Visualized through embroidery. And that was our workshop. I forgot why I was telling you about this workshop. Yes, because so after we did all of that, what happened was, shortly after, my team would start to raise their hands. And this were all happening in Melbourne. So my team in Jakarta, they kind of just supported us remotely. They helped with content and things like that. But shortly after what that happened was like, hey, you know what? Like there is a space that just opened in Jakarta. Like we could do something like that. Or, there's a library that's just opened. Oh, like they have this program and we can do that. And so what happens is, Data Garden kind of catalyzes this mitosis, right? Of like, oh, this can happen here. This can happen here. There's a community organizer in Hawaii who reached out to me earlier this year. She's like, I don't know you, but I like what the Data Garden's doing. And, I have this community and, I do a lot of activism here. I want to do it the way you guys do it. How did you do it? And so it was just a 45-minute conversation, but it was enough to kind of equip her and get her going on what she wants to do. So bottom line is that I would hope that the Data Garden becomes a case study of what happens when you invest in young girls and women. There's a quote from, I think it was from like Care Australia. They had a campaign that said, when you lift up a woman, she brings 4 people with her. And the idea is that, when you invest in the education of young girls and women, we actually really do take up other people with us. And so I think I would hope that we become kind of evidence of that playing out. I honestly can't remember what your initial question was, but I hope that...
Yeah, me neither. But
I hope that
I
it's valuable in some way, yeah.